All right, welcome to the FluoriTech Complete Test THC and CBD demo. Today we are going to be taking this sample of cannabis and we are going to be decarbing it and testing it for THC and CBD. This test is incredibly important, especially with hemp compliance, as right now the main testing mechanism for the FDA is a decarb test. So what I'm gonna do right now is pop this sample, which is just fresh ground flower, into an oven at 120 degrees Celsius for an hour, which our science team has done rigorous testing, and that is the amount of time and that is the temperature which gives the best results without vaporizing cannabis. There's an airtight seal on this glass tube that's gonna prevent any escape of the vapor. So I'm gonna pop that in, and in an hour, that's gonna be ready to decarb. All right, so we have our decarboxylated material. I have already gone through the extraction process and just put it in a little vial here for the test so I don't spill it. And we are gonna jump right in. So on the screen, you are seeing that we are about to run the CBD and THC test. What we have already done as well is we have already calibrated the machine for the THC and CBD testing. The calibration is done by pointing the arrow towards the CBDA scope, as both of the cannabinoids tested are done using that scope specifically. So I'm gonna start this test. The sample is, I believe, something. I'm just gonna call it something. I forget the name of what we are testing. And then I'm just gonna go right forward into the THC and CBD test. We got 100 grams, or milligrams, sorry. Remember, you have the 5 milligram either way leniency, so between 95 and 105 milligrams to test. All right, so just like with the THCA test, I'm going to take 1 pipette of the extract solution and I'm going to add it to CBD tube 1. A little bit of a difference between this test and the THCA and CBDA tests is the tubes are numbered a little bit differently because there is a little bit of a different order that we do things in. So that is something that you have to keep in mind as you're going through. And remember, the rule is to be as meticulous as possible, always reading the instructions and always following them exactly. So I've done that, I've mixed it by hand. We're gonna move to the next step. The next step is adding a stir bar to the cuvette, which I've already done, and then adding the entire contents of CBD tube 2 into that cuvette. Which I have now done, and then adding it to the device. Now on top of that, we are going to be taking the mixed extract with the buffer solution, or the intermediate solution, and we are going to be adding this to the device. I always manage to screw up calling the buffer solution the intermediate and the intermediate the buffer. Been doing this for 2 years now, still screw it up. All right, so we're gonna take a measurement. That should take about 1.5 minutes, 2 minutes. And then we will be adding CBD tube 3, which is the dye, to the solution. And then we'll be taking a reading and then we'll move right on to THC testing. So the THC and CBD test combined takes about 5 minutes, whereas if you wanted to do a CBDA test and THCA test, you're looking at about 25 minutes. So even with the decarb, it's not that much longer, especially if you're doing multiple samples at a time. All right, so the measurement has been taken and now we're gonna add the dye to the solution. And take that measurement. All right, so now we're in the THC part of the test. The unit has taken a reading of the CBD, which is in here. And now we're gonna move on to the THC part. So what we're gonna do is very similar to the CBD we are gonna take 1 pipette of the extraction solution that we have made, and we are gonna add it to THC tube 1. And then we're gonna mix that well by hand before we move on to the next step. Done that. So the next step, putting a stir bar into the cuvette. I've done that, adding the entire contents of tube 2 into the cuvette. I've done that. And now here's where we differentiate a little bit more from the THCA test. So now we are going to take all the contents, the contents of THCA tube 3. Now this is a stabilizing solution, and this is going to be added to the cuvette in order to stabilize the THC to take a better reading. Now, with this solution in particular, it's very viscous, so you have to be incredibly slow with the pipettes. And as always, we are rinsing the pipette once before we do anything with it. So now we are going to put it into the liquid. The pipette tip goes into the liquid all the way out, then suck up liquid, pull the pipette out of the liquid and all the way out again. What this does is, because that THC tube 3 is quite viscous, what we need to do is we need to make sure that it is rinsed from the cuvette, and that can be done by having that, or sucking up that buffer and pushing it back into the cuvette. So I'm gonna put that into there, and then I'm going to take that extraction and intermediate solution, grab a pipette of that, and place it into the cuvette. Always remembering to keep the liquid away from the walls of the cuvette, just so we don't have any liquid loss, directly into the solution in the cuvette. And now we're going to take the measurement. Step 4 is going to be adding the dye. So if you watch the THCA video, you'd notice that the steps are buffer solution, then dye, then the intermediate solution. In this we go buffer, stabilizing agent, I guess the technical term for it is additive, then it is the intermediate, then it's the dye. So we have a bit of a mix up in the steps, which is why the tubes are labeled a little bit differently. All right, so that's done taking a measurement. Now we're gonna add the THC dye. Just like with everything, rinse the cuvette or pipette, and then into the center of the cuvette. A little bit of the bubbles in there, and begin the test. And we'll get a reading in about a minute and a half. All right, so the measurement has been taken, and we're gonna save that result. And now on the screen, you'll see that we are working with a THC concentration of 4.09% and a CBD concentration of 7.9%, which is about what we expected from what we were testing. So, actually, it's very close to what we were expecting if we wanted to get pinpoint accurate. But thank you for sticking with me and watching this demo on how to do a CBD and THC test in the complete test device. We will be back with a new demo shortly, doing a non-decarbed THC and CBD test. If this looks like something that you might be interested in for your grow or for your lab or for whatever you may use it for, there is a contact us button where you can communicate with myself or one of the other business development representatives, and we can walk you through anything that you may need to know if this has raised any questions.